Hi, this is Doug Vogt from the Dye-Hill Foundation. This is video 2B, where we're going to go through the scientific philosophy behind the formation of the letters of the Hebrew alphabet, the 22 views of the waveform that shows each one of the letters, the three shapes that the 22 letters form, and then finally during it, it's going to be one of the Legends of the Jews that indicated 10 of the letters came from the fiery crown of God. You'll find out which 10 letters they are. The video is going to be intended for computer scientists, as well as theologians. You'll have a chance to actually see how the Hebrew alphabet was formed. You'll also know that the Hebrew should be given the credit for the first alphabet. It's just kind of unique how it came about. You'll also find out that what Moses said was that he didn't create the design of the letters and he didn't do the sequence of letters on the tablets. You'll understand that's absolutely true. Anyway, to recap briefly, my experience has been I'm the first one in 2,600 years that found the real Mount Sinai and all the altars that Moses mentions in Exodus. That'll be covered when I do the video on volume 3 of my books on decoding the Hebrew scriptures. So anyway, we'll get started now. I'll be going over parts of chapter 4 on God's Day of Judgment and chapters 2 and 4 on creation of the Hebrew alphabet. And like I said earlier, I think if you're Christian or Jewish rabbi, I think you're going to really enjoy it. You'll finally understand how some of the legends tie in with the alphabet and the definitive proof that it was Moses that brought down the art of writing. We'll start in with the basic philosophy so you understand how it works. For those who saw my video series 1 on the theory of multidimensional reality, the core of it is this graph. Basically explains how matter comes into this dimension from that other dimension. This is the carrier wave that carries the information for either the elements or us. And every time it crosses the x-axis, it creates a spike. You can look at this as Planck's constant, but actually you can call this a proton or a neutron. The distance between here and here, or here and here, it would be Planck's time. 3.5 or 6 times 10 to the minus 44 seconds. And I also in video 1C and D go into my definition of dimensions, which is different from just length, width, and depth. It's more like dividing the dimensions by how much information it has, how much potential it has, and there's an exponential difference between one dimension to the other. But you'll have to go through those videos, especially video 1B, where it's the clock cycle, C and D is the dimensions, and it goes on from there. But anyway, that's a brief description of what's going on here. Now, what's important with the Hebrew alphabet, every single letter, the original letters, was when this graph, the carrier wave, crossed the x-axis and created the matter world. Now, the atom that you're going to be seeing, well, I'll go to the next video. Let's say this is an atom. Now, one of the legends of the 7 that I covered in the first video, 2A, is that the Torah is the book of life. Now, it's a clue to the atom that we're looking at. We are all carbon-based life forms. So this is the carbon-based, the carbon atom. That's why there's 12 brothers, there's 12 this and that show up all the time, is because the atomic weight of carbon is 12. So as this thing comes into existence, it makes a path counterclockwise and it traces out a toroid shape. These are just a few examples, but this is happening so fast. A half a cycle would be, that Planck's time, 10 to the minus 44 seconds. Pretty short. So, if you take the ball and you put a dot on it, let's say this is the dot, this is tracing that waveform, the carrier wave waveform, as it goes and flips here and goes up and around. I had to create, this is a computer-generated model I created of this waveform. This is nothing more than the carrier wave that you saw, a modified square wave. It's modified by the natural log e to the x. I also had to make a brass model of this thing. This is it here. Because this one gave me perspective, the computer-generated one didn't give me perspective, and it was actually very helpful in knowing how this thing was put together, or how to view the thing, and also what they were doing with some of the letters. Okay, we're going to start with the first 10 letters. Now, one of the legends say that 10 of the letters came from the fiery crown of God, but no one ever understood, or there is no record of which 10 letters it was. So I figured it out. And it's going to be very logical. We're going to basically be going around, this is the 0 place, and we're going to go around every 45 degrees around the middle. We go around, and you're going to view 8 of the letters, the top and the bottom. See that? That's the origin of the heart shape. And also viewed from the bottom, you'll have one of the letters also. We'll go through it all. So, this is the nun, looking at the 0 point, which was, I gotta label these things myself, there. And here's the current day nun. Here's the script one. It's exactly like the waveform here. The oldest we have is from Arad, which is southern Israel. And I figured out when they had this loop on top, they're trying to say this is the top of the toroid. And you can see how it had progressed through time. 800 BCE, then we have 520 BCE, very similar to that. Rabbinical script, 300 BCE. Egypt, 100, goes on like that. But this is the computer-generated waveform here. Here's Tav, very close. You can see how it curves like that, and they kept this like this. I have no idea what they had in mind here, why they have X's. But again, they went back to what we currently have now. Somebody may have had a model similar to this that survived all those years. This is the only way I could figure that they got it, that good. Het, which is just at 90 degrees right there. And you can see there's no space between the top part and the bottom here. And both legs are even. Now that's important. There's 3 letters that I think the scribes could have easily screwed up and made a mistake. It was the previous one, Tev. If he didn't draw this thing low enough, you'd never know. Touching here, I'll finish this and I'll show the next one. Now, when you see a line across like this, it usually means that it's crossing the x-axis. They did it with a number of letters, trying to indicate that it crossed the x-axis and created the matter world. And the alphabet's also like a philosophical statement. So here's the oldest. Again, we have this line across here. But our current models are quite close to my computer-generated one. And here, it's remained more or less the same since 300 BCE. Here's Hey. Now, this is the other letter. If the scribe drew this thing too close here, he may have thought it was the other letter. So any of you computer scientists who are going to, when I get done with this thing, the computer scientists, especially the ones who are working on quantum computing, are going to probably be studying the Torah letters more than any yeshiva student ever did, but for a totally different reason. This is the progression of it. So this is the model. Here's our current letter, which is quite good. The 300 BC was quite good. Here, either they got confused, they didn't know quite how to do that, but they got the line across in the middle and tried to show this is where it would have crossed the x-axis across here. Here's Resh at the 180 degree mark. That's pretty easy to see. There we go. There. And notice it's very logical, every 45 degrees around this thing. And it's very obvious, no problem. Here, either they're trying to show the line in the middle where it crossed the x-axis, and this is the top of the toroid. I don't know. We can't get into the head. It was 800 BC and 500 BC. Can't, but what we have now is very, very close. Bet at 225 degrees. And you can see the waveform, just the same. Remember, this is where it crosses the x-axis, so it's celebrating the creation of the matter world, or life, because it's a carbon atom. Again, same thing, trying to indicate it crossed the x-axis here. This looks like a 9 and a 4. I don't know where they, but listen. We can't get into their heads what they were trying to do. It was probably very difficult for them then to figure out how they're going to do this. Somehow it turned out okay over the years. Looks like the rabbinical script of 300 BC really got it right. They were finally on the right track. Maybe they found one of these models and did it. Here's the Vav at 270 degrees. Pretty obvious. Again, crosses the x-axis here. Here at 520, they put the line here, where it crosses the x-axis. Here, I think they're trying to get the idea. Anyway, so through time, it looks like pretty easy to spot. Daled at 315. This is what we have today for the regular letters. There's the script. The script, I don't know where they got up that, but you can see the waveform is pretty obvious. Again, cross the x-axis here. Again, a line like this. This is so close to what the other letters, the previous letters were. They because of they all look like 9s or 4s. Must have been very confusing for them. This is the shin. Now this is looking from the bottom view. The bottom view, and you have the shin. Here's the U shape here. They got the idea here. That's dead on. Again, the same thing like this. And the reason why it looks like that is, again, the perspective. That's what helped me. The perspective helped me what they were doing here. But that was an easy one to figure out. Now the Tzadik, now they rotated about 3 or 4 of the letters 90 degrees because obviously, depending on how you looked at this thing, it would be the same shape. So they rotated the Tzadik 90 degrees, looks like counterclockwise, and it was hard for them. The script is dead on, our current day script. The cursive of 800 BC is pretty close. And again, they put the line here, and I think this is where it would be crossing the x-axis right over here. Again, here I don't know whether, again, they were having a hard time figuring it out. So, now we get to the interesting stuff. You got now 10 letters. You now know what 10 letters it is. But that's only the first stage. These are all vectors. You have to look at them as a vector looking at a waveform. You have to convert the vector to a plane. So this is the formula that I showed in the video 1 series. 1 over the square root of e, the natural log, gives you the arc cos of 52.66 degrees. The Great Pyramid of Giza is 52.606 degrees. It's only because we don't know how big the capstone was and how much limestone was on the outside edges. Oh, you know, the Great Pyramid of Giza was based on this formula, not on pi, which I originally thought 41 years ago. But what it's saying is that here's your vector, and here's the angle 52.66 degrees. Our matter world is formed 90 degrees out of phase from the vector. So you have information coming this way, and it creates the matter world 90 degrees out of phase from it. So the end result is, when you convert the vectors to planes, you have an 8-sided prism basically with a top and a bottom. So remember what the legend said from video 2A, 10 of the letters fell from the fiery crown of God. Well, what's the shape of a crown? It's round, it'll fit over your head, usually a top. So that's how the legend tried to remember this. This a round thing is 10 of the letters. They just didn't know what letters. I discovered it. Also, you now see the origin of the heart shape, because our heart doesn't look like this. This is the origin of the heart shape that we have. Interesting? Okay, here's the 8 letters. Now these are all viewed at that 52.66 degrees. So you view them 2 ways. Above, like this, and also below, like this. So here's the kaf, here's the waveform, and here's the current day script in capital letter. It's exact. 300 BCE, they evidently must have had one of these models, as somebody figured out this type of a model. They couldn't have known what it meant, though. Ayin. Now, this is one of the 2 letters that have no sound values, and there's a reason why. When I hit the aleph, I'll explain it. But they got a little confused. In Arad, 800 BC, they wrote it as a 0. And I think it's because this waveform, this part isn't here really, but you can see there's an O here. It's either that or grabbing this kind of an O, but there's kind of an O here. They may have grabbed this part of the waveform, which is where it would cross the x-axis. But then they went to something else. Either part of this, here they started getting more like what we currently have. Again, 300 BCE. And they focused on this part of the waveform right here. Looks like a Y. Lamed, that was easy to spot. In other words, it's right there, and you look at it like, I'll try to toss it so you get the idea, like that. And you could clearly see it. This, that looks like they just focused on this part of the waveform. Remember, this is where it's crossing the x-axis and where it actually creates the matter world. It would be like right through here. Again, this is the same waveform here. I have no idea what they're doing there. And again, now by Spain, they already had the same letter we have today. Mim. This is again one of the rotated letters, and it's this waveform at 270 degrees and 52 up. And it's somewhat, you could see where it breaks it here, but they had to rotate it. And here, the top loops are trying to indicate, I think it's the top of the toroid. And again, this is how it evolved, but that's the shape for it. The kaf, originally, again, this is very, very similar to some of the others there. I think that's what confused a lot of them. It messed up. Eventually, they just went to the top part of this waveform. And even though it crosses the x-axis here and here, and I think they tried to preserve it here, but it was, I think it was just too similar to some of the other letters. So how do you delineate one from another? Here's the pay. You can put this was somewhat of a hard one to figure out, but you can see the waveform and this design here, this idea of curling. It's like a curl. Same thing goes here. And the yud and the vav are very close. This is originally the design for the yud, and notice the line I put here was across the x-axis. They've got the line here. They put them in here. They put them in here. But I think this was too close to the vav, which is like that, this part of the waveform. So they got it down to just an apostrophe. Again, a question of expedience because it was too confusing. If the scribe didn't have this tail here, you'd never know the difference between one from the other. This is the aleph. This is the other letter that has no sound value. Now, we'll just handle right now the waveform. Here's the waveform here. This is where we cross the x-axis. The script is the closest to this. 800 BC, you have this, looks like a K. Well, this is kind of that here. Same thing here, trying to indicate where it crossed the x-axis. Now, the reason why Moses did not give a sound value for the aleph and the ayin, he's giving you a clue as to the true lineage of Aaron and Aaron. And that's why, and these two letters are actually opposite each other on this, on the vortex, on this toroid, opposite each other. And he did this deliberately, because he could have given any one of those waveforms its own sound value. He chose those two because in the genealogy, he's telling where one goes to another. In other words, Aaron was Aaron's great-grandson. And he's giving you the clue how to connect them with the alphabet. You can see how esoteric this stuff is. You really have to think way outside the box sometimes. I'll go over here. In case Aaron and Aaron is his great-grandfather. Aaron was Aaron's great-grandfather. And that's the reason why, the only reason why he did this. Okay, so now we have 8 characters. This is what we're looking at, like this. And on this side, ayin and aleph, they're opposite each other. Mim and pei. So you got a total of 8 sides. Now you take, these are all vectors. You have to look at them as vectors on this toroid as this carbon atom comes into this dimension. You convert them to planes and you wind up with basically 8 sides. These are the other sides we talked about earlier. So this is a recap. This is where you find them. It's very logical, every 90 degrees. And this is the shape it creates, right here. An octahedron. Perfect. Now, when you look at one of these sides, perpendicular to one of the sides, guess what you wind up with? The Star of David. So what was David really telling you? That one of the shapes, that 8 of the letters of the Hebrew alphabet form that. This octahedron. That's what he was telling you. This already tells you right off the bat, this was all done in the First Temple period. Because the Second Temple period, this was all forgotten. Okay, the last 4 letters. These are the least used letters in the entire Torah. And I think there's a reason why. So, the Zion at the 45-degree mark, which is, give you a perspective here, right here. Looking at it from here. Oh, and tilt it up like that. Oh, I went at the top. I better get it straight myself. Where's 0? There it is. Like that. So, that's the waveform. And you can see the thing on top. Crossing x-axis across here. Here's the script, trying to show that loop. Again, the same thing, inherently trying to show, this is trying to show this, the vertical here, and then the top part here. I think they did the best they could. And also, there's nothing to say we have the best copies of this script at this period of time either. Here's Tet. This is a tough one to figure out, almost figured out by, once I figured out it was creating shapes, then I was able to figure out all the letters the balance of them. And this is one of the harder ones. And this is again rotated 90 degrees. And you can see what we have for capital letters. This I have no idea where they got that from. That's even tougher. I don't know where they got it from. But this is what the shape is, like this. They got this right. I don't know. It depends on how they were viewing this thing. Looks like Spanish, the Spanish script was very good also. Gimel. This was actually easy to figure out. You can see the shape here. Our capital letter. The script one, not so easy to figure out. Here in the cursive of 800 BCE, they've just got this part, but this looks so much like a vav, so I think they had a tough time figuring some of this stuff out. By Islamic Spain, they had basically the same letters we have today, which is pretty good. Samek, not an easy one, but I was able to figure it out. Now I flipped it here because it looks like at 800 BCE they got this thing right. This waveform is here. It's pretty obvious. And they show with the across the x-axis. Then we don't have any record of 520, but 300 looks like they flipped the thing upside down to get this shape. That seems to fit. How we wound up with this, I have no idea. Okay, so recap. This is what you were looking at. 45, 135, 225, and 315. Very logical. 90 degrees every time. Remember the formula. Our reality is created 90 degrees out of phase from the information, from the vector. So, again, you convert them to planes, the vectors to planes, and then you wind up with top of a pyramid. Pretty obvious. Hey, look, someone else uses the same formula. How do you like that? Now, you have the 8 letters in an octahedron, and you have the 4, but it's offset by 45 degrees. So, when you put one over the other, guess what you got? The mandala, which is showed up throughout all the Middle East, India, parts of China. Here, the Muslims use it also. Now, if you remember the mythology behind the mandala is the source of life, the creation of life. It's almost like a mirror of what they say about the Hebrew alphabet. So, those of you who are Muslims out there whose imams want to teach you to go hate Jews, the mandala is the origin came from the Hebrew alphabet. That's the origin of it. The next video, C, we'll get into more of this. We're going to get into the dimensions, the summary of the shapes. We're going to get into the dimensions, which have to do with those sides. We're going to substitute the planes for the letters in the Torah, and then you'll actually see what the Torah forms, physically forms. We'll connect this with quantum mechanics and quantum computing. Remember, this book was indexed by the Library of Congress Q76.889, which is mathematics, quantum computing. They're not kidding. I'm not kidding. So you're going to find out what the Torah actually is. And I'm going to go through some of the mythologies of what it says about the Torah. You'll see then why it all fits and why it's correct. Anyway, Dihole Foundation is a 501c3. We'd love to have contributions to continue the work, especially on the polar versal stuff. And I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'm sure you learned a lot. I think some of the stuff was kind of surprising, I'm sure.